I love a good cliffhanger, don't you? Hello, everybody. Welcome to that is the wittiest I could come up with right then. In the entire trailer, I'm sitting here going, okay, what would sound really cool to come back on? And that's the best that I could come up with. So there you have it.
Good trailer though. Very good trailer.
But welcome to NonSequitur. I'm Kyle Curtis. We are joined, as always, by Steve McRae. David is producing, and with us is our lovely honorary co-host. She holds the title of the most consecutive reigns as co-host. Caitlin Chloe is here, and I was telling her before we promised her that we would give her a somewhat normal stream. The last times that she's been here, it's just been not very well. She didn't get healed the last time, so that kind of threw everything for a loop. But nonetheless, we are glad that she is back.
Thanks for having me.
We're all looking forward to her healing too. I was a little bit disappointed on that she didn't get a healing, but maybe next time.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm going to don my glasses so that I can give this man a proper introduction. Very interesting, I think, show tonight. I got contacted from this gentleman, and I was reading through what it was about, and the more that I read, I was like, oh, this is just like the Da Vinci Code. And I was obsessed with the Da Vinci Code. I mean, it sounds fascinating, and I think everybody's going to get a kick out of this. Let me find my place real quick. Charles Kowalski is a two-time winner of the action thriller, Colorado Gold Award for his Mind Virus in 2013, and also in 2016 for the forthcoming Day of the Watchers. He divides his time between Japan, where he teaches at a university, and his family home in Maine. Mr. Kowalski, thank you for coming on tonight. How are you, sir?
Thank you for having me.
So here, now
I'll say good evening or good morning over here. That I'm in the Japan phase of my cycle at the moment, so I'm joining you from Japan.
Oh, awesome!
Can you say it in Japanese?
Ohayo gozaimasu, or konbanwa, whichever time of day you choose to make it.
I can barely pronounce either word. I'm not even going to attempt that.
I don't know what he said, but it sounded damn good.
Yeah, we're going to take your word on it. Before we get into the discussion tonight, though, we're going to jump into what we've got coming up for the week really fast. Tomorrow, we will be having the continuation of the coin talk that we had last week with Rick Yefrak. A lot of you have been asking when we're going to be doing that again. That will be tomorrow at 8 o'clock. On Thursday, we will be joined by Mr. Atheist and Jay Dyer. Jay Dyer wrote a book about esoteric Hollywood and the symbols that are in film that kind of prove that it's a satanic cult. So he's going to be on to discuss that with Mr. Atheist. That will be also at 8 o'clock. And then on Friday, we will be joined by Nightmare Fuel to discuss politics and a couple of other things. That is also at 8 o'clock. Saturday, we have a special guest with us as well. I don't have a card for it yet, but we will be joined by Jay Glaser from the Atheist Experience. He will be with us at 8 o'clock on Saturday. Okay, so let's dive in. Do you want us to call you Charles? Is that okay?
Charles is fine. Yes, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to read basically what the summary of the book is, and then I'm going to let you kind of introduce yourself and tell us how you got started on this project, and we'll dive in a little bit deeper after that. Mind Virus features Robin Fox, a peace-loving professor of world religions who wants only to leave his desk, his dark past as a military
past.
Yeah. I'm trying to look out of the corner of my eye without shoving my head down completely. His dark past as a military interrogator behind him. But when an unknown suspect tries to disperse a deadly virus in downtown Washington, Fox is unwillingly drawn back into the shadowy world of intelligence. The FBI and CIA automatically suspect Islamic terrorists, but Fox digs in deeper to discover the far more frightening truth. a global conspiracy to eradicate all religions from the face of the earth. So that is a pretty intense concept for a book. To basically, what you're doing is you're switching out, I guess, the religious angle for the lack of religion angle. But before we kind of dive into that, tell us about yourself, the success of the book, how it's been received, and then we'll take it piece by piece from there.
Okay, well, as for myself, this is my debut novel, and I'm happy to say that so far it's been quite well received. The critical attention that I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. Reviewers have said things like, this is a very plausible story, or one said he takes a frightening idea to its logical and terrifying conclusion. So that's what I was going for. And I had another reviewer who said that it was very respectful towards all religions and towards those who didn't believe. And that was also what I was going for. So I've been very happy with the way the book has been received so far. The impetus for it came, well, I think the germ of this idea had sort of been incubating in my mind ever since 9/11 and the emergence onto the world stage of what has been called the new atheist movement, and some of its more vocal spokespeople like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris. And as you've probably figured out, I owe my title to Richard Dawkins, who said way back in a 1991 article, "Faith is one of the world's great ills, comparable to the smallpox virus, but harder to eradicate." So that sort of planted the seed in my mind. What would happen if someone were to take that and, well, to take it excessively literally and to say, well, religion really does need to be eradicated the way the smallpox virus was, and I'm the one to do it. So that's where it began.
And Dawkins never was one in subtlety, I don't think. He kind of
just
no,
real quick,
I wouldn't say so.
Charles, can we have you move your mic like down below, because you're talking right into it, and the outside is picking it up very, very bad right now. If you can move it down like maybe an inch or move it away. Yep, that, you know what, should be perfect. Awesome, thank you. Try that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So what was you said that this kind of was planted in your mind with what Richard Dawkins said. How much do you think that is in thanks to just how kind of shocking something like 9/11 could happen? And I guess ultimately we should ask you, I guess, first, at which worldview are you approaching doing this novel? Are you an atheist that was writing this, as kind of a what if situation, or are you coming at it from a theistic standpoint, and this may be a frightening one-day occurrence?
Well, as you've read, my protagonist is a professor of world religions, and my protagonist, to a large extent, is me. I grew up in the Christian faith, and that is still what I profess, but I have also always been fascinated by all of the other religious traditions in the world.
Let me stop you real quick.
So long in Japan.
I think you're a little too far. You're just a little too far.
We're gonna get a sweet spot there. I know. Trust us, it happens. It's okay.
Is this better?
Try that now.
Okay, yes. So as I was saying, like my protagonist, I've always been fascinated by the different world religions and how everyone approaches the idea of the divine differently, but the idea that there is something divine, the idea that there is something transcendent, is common to all cultures in the world. And especially since having spent so much time in Japan, I've been particularly fascinated by Shinto and Buddhism. So yes, exploring the commonalities and the differences among various world religions has always been an interest of mine. So I'm like Robert Hawks in that respect.
And what do you have to do to sort of, I guess, prepare yourself, get yourself immersed in what you're going to be talking about? Like, how involved was the studying of the different aspects that you're going to be introducing into this book? How far involved did you get in terms of like prep for the book?
Okay, well, in order to research for this book, basically what I had to do was to become very familiar with the writings of the, like, am I allowed to use this term, new atheist? I know that there are some people who don't like it, but that's
Fine.
the handle that in many cases the movement seems to have chosen for itself. But in the writings of people like Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris, and to go even back further and to study Nietzsche and read their writings, go online, spend some time hanging out in atheist versus theist debate chat rooms and see what the arguments were on the other side. Basically, what would, like, taking this premise of the book that there is a global terrorist cell that is dedicated to atheism, what would motivate a person to join such a group? Well, what would motivate someone to start such a group in the first place? And what kind of people would they be likely to recruit? So really to get into the perspective of such a person who might be a likely recruit for a group like this and find out what would motivate them. What could my protagonist, who's a former military interrogator, possibly use to his advantage?
And I think this is where I want to spend a little bit of time, because I think this is, to me, an interesting kind of hypothetical to play around in. But from what you saw and the kind of research that you did going into this, how likely do you think it would be for something like this to occur, and what would be sort of kind of the catalyst that would cause that to happen?
Well, actually, just a moment before I logged in to join this show, I saw that you had posted this on Twitter, and someone had posted a comment saying, "This book is a non sequitur. You can't kill in
Saw
the
that.
name of nothing." Yeah, and
Well played. Well played.
well played. Well, that's what I thought, that somebody would see this and think, oh yes, this is the ultimate non sequitur. To the best of my knowledge, anyone who has ever picked up a topic like this before has done it as a joke. Like, I saw a wonderful piece in a satirical Canadian newsletter with the headline, "Atheist Suicide Bomber Kills 18 Agnostics." So,
They're killing my people
And-
now. What up with
See,
that?
sometimes we feel like killing Steve, but that doesn't mean we will.
That's actually
Yeah,
funny.
come on, be nice to me here.
Well-
my people, my agnostic people. I'm the only agnostic on the entire
sorry if I touched a
tribe
sore
here. That's
spot.
why.
No, it's
Go
hilarious
ahead.
actually. It's well played. Well played.
That is funny.
My favorite actually was the Australian stand-up comic Jim Jeffries, who made this a part of his Freedom DUMB routine. And let me see if I can do him justice. No one has ever killed in the name of atheism. No one has ever cut into human flesh, looked down camera, and gone, "In the name of nothing!"
You actually did. You actually did.
True.
And I'll tell you,
Wow,
It's
he's
accurate.
actually one of my, his
Jim
his
Jeffries, right?
Trump, yeah. His
Oh, wow.
that special was
That was good.
amazing. So
It was good. Yeah, I
you're
watched it
on-
too.
You're on a good start. You're on a good start.
So, yes, and I have to say, at first, that's how I approached it, just as a satirical role reversal, just to play with this idea of, well, how would it be if the shoe were on the other foot? And just started on it with this humorous perspective of how would the atheist community be reacting if they suddenly found themselves in the position of the Muslim community post 9/11, which is always having to deal with this guilt by association, having to go into defensive mode, having to warn one another. So do not, under any circumstances, attempt to carry books by Christopher Hitchens through airport security. So that's how I began. And then in the course of researching it and writing it, I went from, well, yeah, of course this could never really happen, to actually, maybe it could happen, to why hasn't it happened yet?
Now that's
Why would it
interesting.
happen?
Yeah, I think that's where my
Well, how does it
disconnect
happen
is.
though? I mean, what do you know? Ever heard of the League of Military Atheists back in the Russian days? They were a
The
group
what?
of Russians that actually went around. There's a group called the League of Militant Atheists that were back in the Soviet Union that went around committing
Yeah.
atrocities against religious people.
Okay,
No.
actually, I hadn't heard of them. I wish I had. But I wanted to stay off Russia and things like that because the focus is not on, well, like, if you talk about Russia, which ultimately became a communist state that was officially atheist, like, if you're talking about suppression of religion in general by a state that's nominally atheist, a lot of ink has been spilled about that. What I was more interested in exploring was the question of whether a non-state actor might be motivated to violence against religion in general, not one religion against another, but militant atheism versus all religion.
I guess my question to that, and then I'll go to Casey because I'm sure she has a question as well. But if that were the case, let's say we have somebody that is getting ready to commit an act of terror in the name of atheism.
Mhm.
I think that the rest of the atheists would immediately say that that guy's crazy, like he doesn't speak for for us. Whereas when you have it done in religion, there's always the extremist sects kind of team up and take credit for it, and it's more of a group unity thing. To me, if an atheist did it in the name of atheism, it would just be kind of like a lone wolf, I guess. Because he certainly,
Right.
you can't do that. I don't think in the name of something that the group is founded on the lack of believing in a
Mhm.
deity. I don't know, Casey. What do you think?
Well, I mean, to kind of go further into your point, not all atheists, but a lot of atheists are humanists. So terrorism on behalf of those people just would not happen. And I actually read an interview that you did with, I think it was Pen and Muse. I think that's what it was called. And you kind of said the same thing that you did a few minutes ago, that the more you wrote, the more plausible you thought that this kind of thing could happen. But my question is, why and how?
Okay, well, okay. Can I go back to what you said a moment ago, Kyle, like about how
Sure.
if such a thing could happen, and if these people were to claim to be acting in the name of atheism, of course, the mainstream atheist community, and I know that a lot of your listeners might think that that phrase there is a non sequitur, that there's no such thing as an atheist community, but let's
Just keep them
just
coming.
assume for the sake of argument, yeah.
Love it,
But
love it.
of course, they would immediately denounce such a thing. And in the book, that is exactly what the president of, well, the imaginary equivalent of American atheists does. As soon as the identity of the attackers and their motivation is made known, he says, we condemn those who hijack the name of reason to commit this irrational act. No one who harms any human being can be called a humanist. So that goes back to what you were saying, Casey, that, of course, I would say 99.99% of atheists would agree that being an atheist means being a humanist, and close to the top of their list of thou shalt nots would be to harm any other human being, because the human life is paramount. Would you agree with me on that?
Actually, no. I think that atheism is a single answer to a single question. So, no, I don't agree that being atheist means being humanist at all. The atheist community is very diverse in its politics, in its beliefs about everything else. So, a lack of belief in God doesn't necessarily mean that you value humanity at all.
Yes, so
Interesting.
I think the reason why this phrase atheist community or atheist movement or anything like that, it touches a nerve with a number of people, I feel, because, of course, by definition, that word atheism, it just means a lack of belief in God or gods. And so on the face of it, the only thing that connects one atheist with another atheist is a negative, the absence of belief. So would you
Well, it
agree with me so
depends.
far, Casey?
I wouldn't, but I'm not. I'm. She's a colloquial atheist. I'm a philosophical person, and in philosophy, that's not how it's defined.
Yeah. Well, on the face of it, and I have seen that argument advanced very often. So, as a way of saying that there could never be any guilt by association because the only thing that connects this person with this other person is absence of belief.
I think I see
Yeah,
what
but
you're
at the
doing,
same
though.
time, that's not. At the same time, that's not really how it works at all. I mean, if you just look at the YouTube atheist community, there's a lot of guilt by association. And when I say atheist community, generally I'm talking about atheist activists, not like your typical just non-believer. Like that's not who I'm talking about. But, there is a lot of guilt by association within the atheist community because people try to pile on a bunch of stuff to atheism. A few years back, well, several years back now, there was a thing called Atheism Plus. Are you familiar with that?
Atheism Plus?
Yeah.
I haven't had the pleasure. Can you tell me more about
it's
that?
not a pleasure. Don't worry.
Okay.
So it basically... It really created a lot of rifts within the atheist activism community because what people tried to do was tie, political beliefs and other kinds of things onto atheism and essentially create this purity standard for what an atheist is supposed to be. And that doesn't work. It didn't work and it failed marvelously. I mean, it failed. It was unbelievable.
And I want to say, Casey,
but yeah,
because you brought that up, Casey, Charles is now blocked by Steve Shives. So congratulations.
Congratulations. You know what? There have been people blocked by Steve Shives, Charles, that didn't even know the guy, that have never even had interactions with him. Right now, anybody go check. If you don't know Steve Shives, you're probably blocked. Then you're probably blocked by him. You're not exaggerating either.
Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, if you follow the wrong person on Twitter, you're probably blocked. So that has happened a lot in the atheist. I know, it hurts me too. I spend a lot of time thinking about Steve Shives. So
sorry,
it's
go on.
Oh no, it's fine. But yeah, it's generally speaking, there isn't, I agree with you. There's not really anything else that connects us. However, within atheist people, you do have groups, that kind of come together based on other beliefs. And we all happen to be atheists too. So that it's in the atheist community that I talk of is like the online, the Twitter, the YouTubes, the activists that do the conferences and, do stuff like we're doing right now. So that's the community I'm kind of referring to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you say activism, now let me see if I understand you right. Like when you say activism, like an activist is trying to accomplish some end. And the sense that I've gotten from following the atheist activist community is that the end that they're pursuing is to have atheism, to have lack of belief treated with at least equal respect as any kind of religious belief. Do you think
I think normalizing atheism is part of it.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay. So when you say atheist activism, what other ends do you have in mind that they're trying to accomplish?
Well, generally speaking, in the U.S., more than a lot of other places where it's prominent because they have a lot more atheist people. In the United States, we have a lot of people in government who try to pass laws that are based on religious principles. So keeping a secular government is really important to a lot of atheist activists because,
so protection of the First Amendment separation clause, keeping religion out of government.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's important to a lot of people. It's also, there are groups of atheists that's not important to them at all. I don't understand how, but it is what it is. A lot of times we'll gather with different groups of people to accomplish different things or try to, educate people on certain things. There are other atheists who are really into science. So they spend a lot of time combating bad scientific ideas. And that is aside from atheism, but they also happen to be atheists. So it's just you have kind of different groups who come together at different times for different things. We all happen to be atheists. We're all activists in different ways. But generally it surrounds the idea of secularism.
Mm-hmm. Right. So secularism in the sense of keeping the government and keeping society secular, to keep religious bias out of it.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement? Yeah. So if that's what you mean when you say the mainstream atheist community, and you also say that within the atheist community there is a great deal of diversity. There are some people with other motivations, other special interests. And I think you would probably also agree with me that there would be a smaller group that we could call anti-theists that are motivated not so much by like secularism in the sense of keeping a balance between or keeping the separation of church and state, but by active hostility towards religion. The idea that religion is a social evil and must be eradicated. And of course, if you ask them how they mean to eradicate it, they would say, oh, through education, through rationalization, through presenting different ideas and making sure that people are exposed to them, trying to combat religious propaganda. But still, there is that, you could say, militant wing, even though like they, not militant in the sense of using physical violence, but in the sense of having a very hardline, uncompromising ideology that's hostile towards religion in general.
I disagree that anti-theists necessarily have an ideology. I'm an anti-theist. I think that religion is a net negative on society. And I do think that anything that we can do with religion, we can do without religion. And I don't condone any kind of violence. So you're right in the fact that the militant part doesn't necessarily have to be violence. I don't hate religious people, but I do think that a lot of religious people are severely indoctrinated and have been generation after generation after generation. And it leads to poor education. It leads to bad ideas. It leads to inequality of people. And I think that there are a lot of ways that we can work these things out. But part of that is breaking people out of this religious mindset. But that doesn't have to be done in a violent or militant way at all.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I would say within the mainstream atheist community, you could say there is an anti-theist group to which you belong. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
And you, again, would say that that religion is a social ill and that the cure is education. Or I don't want to put words into your mouth, but deprogramming.
Well,
you said breaking
yeah, but
people
I
out
think
of a religious
deprogramming is
mindset.
kind of a harsh word. I think deprogramming is kind of a harsh word. I don't believe in forcing someone not to believe. I don't believe in making any kind of religion illegal. I think that people have the right to believe what they want to believe, but I feel like bad information and bad ideas keep them down. And if we can expose them to them, it has to be, in my opinion, it has to be everyone's individual choice to decide to break away from religious indoctrination. That has to be their own choice. But you can help people get there in a way where you're simply guiding them. And if they want that guidance, they can take it. And if they don't, they absolutely don't have to. But I think that's a big part of, especially the community that I am around most often, most of us feel this way. And so a lot of people provide, science videos. They debunk anti-science stuff, and they try to, we talk to religious people. If religious people have questions, I have a Facebook page that has about 135,000 people, and like people message the inbox all the time, asking questions, religious people, non-religious people, like, how do you handle this? And, we just talk to them, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a negative experience. Sometimes it can be, because a lot of times religious people will come on super hot, but that's really not an effective way to communicate. So I generally try not to do that. Sometimes I do, but I'm a little sassy sometimes. So I was a little punchy on Twitter today, I admit.
Twitter was a dumpster fire. They deserved it.
It was awful today.
With everything that she said on my end, except for one thing. And I changed my opinion on this a couple of weeks ago after a show we did. But before this, I would have said and agreed that I don't think there are religions that should be illegal or banned. But Scientology would be one that I would rid the planet of in a heartbeat, had the opportunity to. There are some things that go on within that are just absolutely crazy, and there's a part of me that wants to say some of the JWs too. It's tough because I think what religion does to people sometimes is it takes your humanity away. Like with the Jehovah's Witnesses, they're being forced to be put in a situation where you have elders of the church looking at you while your child is in a hospital bed, not able to give a blood transfusion because of what your religion says, and watching people die based on their indoctrination. And to me, that's criminal. I mean, I think that is absolutely criminal to do that.
Why? I agree with that, Kyle.
To have that, right?
No, but I mean, I agree with that, but I think those are specific acts that should be illegal. Like, I think that faith healing should be illegal. And I think that if a child needs a blood transfusion, they should get it, period. An adult, I think, should be allowed to make that decision for themselves. But when it comes to children and faith healing and blood transfusions and practices like that, I think should definitely be illegal. But their belief structure, I don't think there is a way to make it illegal in any kind of humanistic way. I just don't think there's a way to do that.
You don't want to place their beliefs.
Those beliefs are stemmed off of their faith and beliefs. The reason that they have to arrive at a situation where they're choosing to let someone die and not get a blood transfusion comes out of what they believe. So I mean,
it's true.
If it weren't for that, then you wouldn't have the issue to begin with.
I agree, but to me, that's where education and trying to break people out of the indoctrination is the way to do it. I think that's how you have to be able to do it. And the more normalized that atheism becomes, I think the easier that is going to be, because there are churches that they teach the craziest things about atheists that aren't even true at all. I mean, I've told you about the girl that I work with, right? The girl who thinks that I come home and put on horns and sacrifice small animals to Satan in my basement. Like, her church taught her that.
You told her about that?
Shit's crazy.
You should have kept that quiet. That's secret.
Oh man, Charles has had you best face.
Divulging the secret rituals? Oh man.
Charles has had you best face.
That shit is crazy. I don't do things like that. And I will be honest, I don't know a single atheist that does.
What do you think about what we, as someone who's kind of more on the spiritual, like usually we don't actually go to Steve when we want to get more of a spiritual side, because I guess a good question real quick to get it out of the way, would an agnostic ever commit terrorism in the name of agnosticism?
That's a sequel. That'd make a great sequel. I'll help you write it.
Well,
what are you blowing up? I don't know. Why?
Yeah, no, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
I don't know
No.
shit about
It's those poor agnostics that always end up being the victims, like of that atheist suicide bombing in Sweden.
Yeah, exactly. My people.
So
but what do you-
go on. Yeah, so
I
the
was gonna-
potential for terrorism in the name of agnosticism, no, I would say it's zero, because nothing can come from nothing. Where the potential lies,
Really?
I feel, is in passionate
Oh no.
hostility towards religion in general. And I think to sum up the discussion that we've been having, like about Scientology, about the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I think we might all be able to agree on this, that whenever an abstraction becomes more important than an actual human person, that's when the potential for atrocities appears. That
Do you
whenever
agree, though?
an article of faith becomes more important than the life of the child who is in front of you, then that is the danger zone. Like,
Do you agree that
another, okay, for
we got,
another
by the way, we
book,
got some terrible lag here.
Yeah,
You guys notice that?
we got.
Sorry,
It's like 3
12
seconds
hours
lag.
time difference.
So
It's just-
forgive us in the
it's just 'cause
audience.
he's
There's
a-
actual lag in here. He's in Japan.
He's on the other side of the planet, guys. Flat Earthers. He's on the other side of the planet.
Prove it.
A little bit longer to.
Yeah, you're not falling off the planet right now, are you? You don't have a safety harness on you or anything? Not falling into the sun? Nope.
I hope not.
Okay, good.
Have you
good,
seen
'cause
the
that's a hell
ice
of a way to
wall?
die.
Because I think it's near Japan,
Yeah.
right? No, I'm just kidding.
Japan, it could be.
Okay, so and recently, again, doing research for another work in progress, I had read an interview with someone who had been Hitler's private secretary. And one of the things that she remembered about him was that he was not capable of thinking except in abstractions, that the happiness or pain of an individual human person meant nothing to him. It was all about the ideas. So I feel that when you do that, when you give pride of place to an abstraction, to an article of faith, whether it be religious or whether it be political or whether it be anti-religious, and that is the dangerous territory. And so what I was doing with this thought experiment in my book was to imagine, well, what if this tiny little splinter group of a splinter group of a splinter group off of the anti-theist movement were to allow that abstract idea that religion is a great social ill, that religion is holding the species back from taking the next step in its evolution, that religion must be eradicated by any means necessary, and that the process of education and rationalization is just too slow. More direct action is required. If they were to allow themselves to be governed by that abstract idea, that is what could potentially create an atheo-terrorist.
Now this can go into a pretty. I mean, I just want to play devil's advocate for a second. With
Okay.
Let me ask Casey this question, because that brings up an interesting angle, and I want people to understand when I ask this. This is not me, like, feeling this way. I'm just going based off the premise that he was just talking about. So let's say that, Casey, knowing what we know or how we feel about religion, if someone were to take actions that rid the world of religion altogether, therefore freeing diversity, progress, change in what we would consider a positive direction, would that ultimately in the end be justified for generations to come? That's a really difficult question.
It is, and it depends on how that happens. If it comes at the expense of people's lives, or oppression in any way, no. I don't think so. I think there are a lot better ways to deal with it. And, while I do think religion is a net negative, it's something that has been around for not necessarily organized religion, but belief in gods or deities or supernatural powers have been around since basically the beginning of humanity. It's how people initially tried to explain things that were happening that they did not understand. And so you really have to tread lightly. I think our society will eventually move past the need for that. But it's been so ingrained into our humanity that separating it from it quickly and violently it's just a bad plan. I just think that's a terrible plan, and I would never support that, even though I think that religion is a net negative and we would be much better off without it. Now, if it could disappear tomorrow and everybody be fine and like us just move forward as a society without it, I think that would probably be okay. But still, you're going to have, I don't know, that's just assuming that it would be gone like it never existed. I don't know. There's a lot of people who rely on their faith so much personally that stripping people of that is frankly inhumane, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let me ask you, Casey, do you also agree that if religion is going to go away in some regards, that the organic approach is, it's going to organically go away because of people getting more scientific, people getting more educated? Now, you know me, I'm not an atheist. I'm not, even considered to be an atheist, but I do agree with Kyle. There are certain religions that are detrimental, no matter how you slice it. And I'm not going to go into the details of which ones I think they are, but there are things to be said. And I think it's not so much the beliefs, even though they stem from the beliefs, but we can take actions on things that come from those beliefs, such as blood transfusions. Those things are actionable. We can protect children in those regards. And hopefully those religions that have those kind of things will adopt a better standard for their religion in time, hopefully.
Charles, religion has progressed throughout society. Sorry. Religion has progressed throughout society. So Christianity in the medieval times is nothing like Christianity is now. So, I mean, religion does progress very, very slowly because they have to. And one reason is because they have static sacred texts. The sacred texts, they don't change. So when it's really difficult for religions to progress forward while still having these antiquated texts and rules and laws. So they have to figure out ways to do that, because if they just say, oh, well, this part, they didn't really mean that part, and we're just going to move forward and do this different from now forward, it starts to break their religion down. Well, if that wasn't right, what about this? What about this thing over here? And what about that? And so in order to keep their following, they can't just change overnight. It is a long progression of change. It is happening. And people are getting less religious overall. So I think, and even people who believe in God are less inclined to be part of an organized religion than ever before. So we're getting there. It just is going to take a long time.
Well, and we understand, Charles, that because you're writing a novel, you can't wait for it to evolve from the nice area. You have to kind of go into the extreme. But I think that I want to press a little bit further on this, because the more I think about it, the more parallels I see from I see where Charles kind of had a genius idea with this, because let's say in our history we have fought wars over many things that we have felt were stopping progress, were being evil to people. We went and liberated countries, killed countless people to stop that for the better good in the long run. So if you were to compare it in something like that, I mean, if you really feel that religion is as bad as, I just look at it from my point of view. The deaths that could have been saved from, let's take this point on 200 years, even with the Salem witch trials. I mean, how many people were killed during? I mean, just hundreds. Think about how many you could be saving in the future with depression, suicide rates, those kind of things. And I'm not, like I said, guys, I'm not saying that that's how I feel, but I see where he's building a case for there being people who could see themselves being justified in doing something like this for the greater good down the road. I mean, that's frightening in a way.
I don't see that extremism is any respecter of faith or lack of faith. I think that if somebody
sure.
has that potential, then it's going to be there. Like when I was imagining my master villain, like he fits the profile of a terrorist mastermind. He's megalomaniac, psychopathic, narcissistic. Atheism or anti-theism just happened to be his platform, but you could probably have given him another platform and he would have done the same thing. So
I don't see it being a far-fetched premise myself.
Yeah, I don't either now.
Well, so your
At first I did.
character-
But
Well, so the character you're talking about is he's not doing this based on what Kyle was talking about in order to save more people in the long run.
no,
He's doing it because he's crazy.
Well,
Well, he's got that dark triad, it sounds like.
If you asked him, he would say that
I'll be
You
patient.
waited all the show for that, didn't you, Casey?
what
Sorry, go ahead. You missed it.
Did you miss it?
You missed it.
The presence of religion in this world is holding the human species back from taking the next step in its evolution. So maybe he envisions a world based on pure science and reason that is free from what he would call the virus of faith, of any kind of irrational belief, and that any kind of action that can bring that about even one day sooner is justified. And he has no consideration at all for the human cost.
I think that's a totally plausible situation, actually.
I absolutely do too now. I've changed my mind. I think that's completely plausible.
I feel like a person like this existing is plausible, but I don't think that getting followers on a global scale and being able to do anything like the book talks about on a global scale is possible at all. You're not going to get enough people to do it.
We've seen a lot of crazy people follow crazy stuff. Let's be realistic here. I mean, there are people that are out there that are charismatic that have gotten people to do all kinds of crazy shit for whatever reason. I don't think whatever the reasons matter anymore. I think that they just want to follow some crazy person.
Flatter.
And well, in my case, so in the case of this book, like, of course, yes, we have the master villain with his master plan, but the characters that I was more interested in developing were the rank and file members of his organization, because, again, my protagonist is a former military interrogator. He's had experience trying to break down terrorist cells, and in that kind of operation, the battleground is the hearts and minds of the rank and file followers. They are the people who, if you can manage to turn them, will be your best assets. So everything depends on your being able to understand them at a very deep level and to figure out why they've done what they've done, why they were susceptible to being recruited by this mastermind. And in the case of my characters, of course, they were all people who had been, one way or another, deeply wounded by the religious tradition they grew up in, who had some reason to harbor a deep-seated grudge, to believe that religion in general, and maybe the religion they grew up with in particular, is a plague on the world and needs to be eradicated. And when someone approached them and said, well, are you tired of waiting? Would you like to join me in doing something that will make that happen a little bit faster? Then they will.
Yeah,
Well,
the angry
I get
atheist
that.
used to be a Christian, right? Or
but when
religion.
There's a lot of angry atheists that used to be religious. Like, that's pretty much almost the entirety of the atheist community in the United States. Outside of the United States, like I said before, there are a lot of people there are a lot of countries that are far more secular. So you're not going to have, you're going to have people who are born without religion and were never indoctrinated into religion. But in the US, that's most of what you're going to get. And a lot of people, when they come out of religion, they are mad. And they're mad for good reason, because they feel betrayed by the people who they loved. They feel like they've been held back in their lives. And so, like, I get that. And I get what you're saying. Somebody coming up and saying, what, you know, there's a way to take care of this now. I think where you're going to lose people is when it comes to killing people, and especially when it comes to oppressing people, because a lot of atheist people are far more liberal. They are far more about equality. Now, that's not a standard, because we talked about this before. There are a lot of a wide variety of beliefs within the atheist community, but for the most part, you're not going to have people who are all about oppressing others. So when it comes to the action, you might get somebody in the door, but I don't think you're going to be able to keep people in a movement like that.
Well, you talk about oppression, and you can only oppress someone if you are the group in power. And again, like, if you want to talk about oppression of believers by atheists, like atheists who held the reins of government, well, there's plenty of historical evidence for that, but that wasn't my focus. Not
Well,
oppression
also
so
too,
much,
that
but
was
just the
state
act of
atheism, which is the state atheism is not the same as atheism. So that those two things are
exactly. So
completely
that's not the
different.
focus here. The focus is on whether anyone could actually be brought to physical violence. And, well, I know that in online forums, it's really hard to tell how serious people are and how many people are just trolling, but I have definitely seen people
Amen.
who have expressed a willingness to go along with that. Said that, yes, if it were allowed, I would kill religious people whenever I found them.
Yeah, I think a lot of
There
that's
are people out
hyperbole, but
there who are
there is a
on
fraction
record
that would
as
actually do
saying
it. Yeah.
that. Whether they're serious or
Yeah,
not,
it's hard to tell.
I don't know.
Right.
Did you ask? Did
But
you
even
actually
so,
ask people that as part of your research or whatever for the book? Like, did you kind of dive into that world a little bit?
I did sort of dive into that world a little bit, but mostly as an observer.
Sure. What did you
but
find
you
out
do think that
in
most
terms
of
of how people felt? Where was the target at there?
Well, I think that the people who hang out in groups like that, especially in the online groups where theists and atheists debate, they tend to be towards the more militant end of the scale. And in most cases, of course, they would never actually escalate to physical violence, although I have, again, seen some who express that willingness. But if you were to put the question to them that you just posed, Kyle, like, if you could press a button and every place of worship in the world would be razed to the ground, every work of art, literature, music with a religious theme would disappear, would they press it? And if that button also included killing every person of faith, would they still press it? I haven't posed that question in a public forum, but I wonder how many people would answer yes.
you're talking about such a small minority, to say the least, right? I mean, because I talked to a lot of people, and I
But that's
don't
all
know
you need,
anybody
really.
that
Do
extreme.
damage. That's
Yeah.
all you need.
But again, how many do you need?
That's true, but that's true. But it probably would be the people, like Casey said, that are ex-theist, ex-religion people. The people that are never religious, they're not usually as angry as the people that have come out of some of these more extreme religions and feeling like they've been betrayed. I've known people that have done that, an exceptional amount of people that some of them actually want to go suing some religious organizations because they feel like they were manipulated by them. Those I could see falling in line with something along this, to be militaristic, to excite to violence. But I don't know how many actually people would be willing to go to the extreme to actually like push a button and get rid of all religious artifacts and all things dealing with religion. I mean, from religion, we have gotten a lot of art and music and things of that nature. And even from the aesthetic point of view, I don't know what kind of person would want to get rid of all that. I don't think that's an argument I've ever seen from really any atheist that I'm aware of.
Can you
anybody
do
else?
a revised
So
version of the
that-
book where we
yeah,
can
I might
choose
have
who we
been
get rid of?
muddying the waters by saying that because, well, I did have, well, even in one of my own characters, when the interrogator makes a comment about blowing up a church, he says, "Oh, the buildings can stay. There are some splendid works of architecture out there." So even in that case, somebody who has no qualms about killing people would still want to preserve works of art.
That makes sense.
But
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
It depends on who you're talking about.
Well, so I have a couple of things. One, like usually the angry atheist phase, like most people when they first come out have that period of time. Usually that fades. It takes a little bit of time, but it does typically fade. But here's the other thing too. You can destroy if you push the button. Let's separate the shit and the people, right? Okay, let's separate all the religious shit and the people. If you push the button and it got rid of all the religious shit, you can't get rid of religion by getting rid of buildings, artwork, scripture. You can't get rid of religion that way. You're not going to get rid of religion that way because it is in the minds of people.
Good point.
true.
And
It goes
so,
underground.
I mean, it
yeah.
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you do that. It doesn't matter if you make it illegal. That is never going to eradicate religion ever. So that is not it, to me. That's just any kind of critical thinker or rational person is going to understand that all you're going to do if you make tomorrow, if every religion was illegal, all you're going to do, like Steve said, is push it underground. You are not going to get rid of it. You are going to make it quieter, but you are going to make it stronger. And that's a problem. You can't eradicate religion that way.
So he's right in.
So if your goal is to eradicate religion,
yeah,
Huh?
yeah, again, I was muddying the waters by talking about works of art and things like that. But again,
It
the
was a
core
good point.
question is whether anyone could consider that the eradication of religion was such a worthy goal that it could justify the taking of human life. And Casey, you would say absolutely not.
No, absolutely not. Because that's not going to work. I mean, unless you killed every single religious person. And even if you did, people who knew religious people and people who are maybe non-believers who love religious people, you're killing their family. You're going to destroy the entire world, and the society would break down completely if you did something like that. It just would never work. So that's why I don't think that you're going to get a bunch of critical thinkers together and decide to kill a bunch of kill religious people on a mass scale. Because
but the question is fascinating.
Sure.
It just wouldn't
absolutely.
work.
It's a very
So,
intriguing question.
yeah. As you say, Casey, that a lot of former religious people go through a very angry atheist phase, which ultimately fades. So, of course,
Right.
if someone were recruiting for a group like this, they would strike while the iron was hot. They would approach recruits right at the moment where their anger was at a peak, and they would be most susceptible to this idea that violence against religion in general would be justified.
Can I ask a question?
Right, but
Casey?
how are you going to convince them to kill their families? Like, how are other people's families? Just because they're mad at religion, how are you going to get them to do that? I think it's a stretch.
And my question stems off of kind of to that. Based on, and I'm not saying that I disagree with you in any way, shape, or form. I just want to pose the question again, playing devil's advocate. But from what you said, it sounds like religion is the only thing, or not the only thing, but religion is holding society up, because if it was taken away, it would collapse. That's an interesting thought too.
If you took it away immediately and violently, it can't be done that way. Yeah, because so much of society, so many people within our society, within the world, have a religious belief of some sort. So if you try to violently take it away from them, you're going to cause, I mean, you would cause all of the religious people to band together where they're separate, they separate, they fight about petty little shit that doesn't matter. You're going to get all those people to come together and fight you. And I don't think religion holds the world together, but I think if you tear something as integrated into our society out of it quickly, then you are going to have a breakdown.
I think maybe we should reconsider what we do, because it sounds like where we are right now is pretty hunky-dory.
Well,
What do you
let me
mean?
ask, do you think it's the same thing for the atheist communities? Like, okay, you were talking about atheist communities before, and granted, the only thing that atheists do have in common is they don't believe in God. That is a fact. All atheists don't believe in God. But do you think that because there are other things that even though atheists have differing beliefs and other things, and there's petty squabbles, blah, blah, there are certain things that most atheists do put forth? I mean, in general, an atheist does want certain things, such as secularism. And now that's not always the case. Now, again, I'm not relating them in such a way that you have to have secularism to have atheism, but you do find a higher proportionality of people in these atheist communities that have things like beliefs of secularism. So those kind of communities will start forming. Do you think the same thing can be said of, like you said, with the religious ones, if they were all being killed off, they would brand together and put all their petty shit aside and could come together for a common goal, like atheists have with secularism, or to spell a flat earth or young earth creationism. That I could probably see a little bit more, couldn't you?
Is that a question for Casey or me?
I would say either or. Take it.
You go ahead, Charles.
So, well, I can say yes. I definitely see that happening. I have seen it happening. Like post 9/11, concomitant with the rise of militant atheism and the Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris group, I have seen more of an interfaith movement. I have seen more ecumenism. I was privileged a couple of years ago to attend the Global Conference on Religions for Peace when it happened here in Japan. So I see that happening. I see various religious traditions more putting aside doctrinal differences and trying to focus on what's essential. So whether that arose in response to like facing an attack from outside, I can't be sure, but I have seen it happening. I think it's a step in a positive direction.
Your personal. Let's talk about you personally. I'm sure that you had a way of looking at the world prior to writing this, and going with your experiences, and as you kind of thought things through and the possible outcomes to these scenarios. Did any of your core beliefs change, or did you either go more strongly in one way than you did the other than you would have if you think before you started this project?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I don't think that in the process of writing this, I've changed my beliefs any. But of course, it has given me a deeper understanding and a deeper appreciation for the other side, for secularism, for the core tenets of the atheist movement, for all of the things that Casey has been talking about, like the idea of keeping religion out of government. And I see a great deal in that secular movement that I admire. Like, I see, like, again, insisting that the United States be true to its founding principles and not having a state religion, insisting that one can be good, one can lead a moral life, be a good human being without religious belief. Like trying, as you said, Casey, to normalize atheism, like to establish the idea of non-belief as at least equally valid a life choice as belief. So yes, I do see a lot in that movement that I admire.
That's interesting that you came to. It's interesting that you came to that conclusion after, because it seems that it would be the opposite after writing about what could possibly take place if atheists decide to commit terrorism in the name of atheism. It seems like that would make you kind of more wary of that side. It's interesting to me that you came out on the completely other side, though.
Well, as I say, as we have been saying, there is so much diversity within the atheist community. And again, there is a lot in there that I agree with. I'm As a writer of fiction, of course, my interest lies in the magic if, the potential. Like if you were to take the most extreme splinter and give it a little bit of a push, what would happen?
Sure.
But one thing that I'm very thankful for is that we can all understand that this book is going to stay in the fiction section.
Mhm.
I'm right
But
about
But
that,
I
right?
gotta tell you, it's yeah. But you know what? It's great to explore these what ifs. That's the whole point of having fiction and these types of genres. I mean, there's nothing wrong with exploring that. I mean, it may not be something that could happen practically, maybe not. But who cares? It's a good story. It's a good story. I'm all for it.
Yeah,
I came out
I
completely
did I did start to read it. I did start to read it today, but I just found out that this was scheduled for yesterday, so I didn't have a whole lot of time.
Well, I
but
just found out a few minutes before the broadcast that you would be joining me, and seeing your Twitter handle, I was like, "Oh my God, what have I let myself in for?"
Yeah, she's had an effect on many
Yeah.
people.
Oh, did you think?
Oh my God, I'm going in
Did
there
you
with
think that
Casey.
we were
No.
gonna? Did you think
Dog
we were
pile.
gonna? Have you seen? Did you see one with KC before? Have you seen her on here prior?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he probably doesn't watch
that
the
is-
stupid ones.
well,
Who
I
does?
was thinking that maybe that's why he got kind of worried, because usually we have KC coming into just kind of, I don't know, what do you want to call it, KC? What is it that you do?
Be a truth hammer.
Fuck with dumb people.
Yeah, Truth Hammer. I
Yeah.
like that. Truth Hammer. But really, we wanted to. I wanted her to have part of a conversation that wasn't just with somebody that believed that the Earth was flat and that they can heal you through Skype and that gravity doesn't exist. We didn't land on the. I
Or
wanted her to have.
Found her some bottom of the barrel.
Or that drink their own piss.
Yeah.
Or that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and this was
Yeah.
this was perfect because it
He-
raises
He
and
laughs.
it wound up working out brilliantly because she did exactly as I knew that she would, and kind of asking those questions that aren't so obvious and trying to dig a little bit deeper at the surface. So she did
I actually
just as
do have another question.
yeah. Go ahead.
Can I
Okay.
ask? Okay. So, like I said, I just kind of started to get into the book today, and I do think it's an interesting premise. I don't think it's like I've said, I don't think that it's necessarily a possibility, but I do think it's an entertaining read, which is kind of the point. It's a novel. Like you're not trying to say this is the future of the world. So, but I do have a question. In the book, you seemed pretty what's the word? Generous toward religion and their peacefulness per se. And so I was curious, is that how you feel like about religion, that it's peaceful, or is that just you, because you said earlier in the show that you wanted to make sure that you were respectful to religion, to all the religions that you were kind of discussing, and I haven't gotten very far into it, so I don't have a lot of knowledge of how that goes throughout the book. But in the beginning, you seemed pretty generous toward the fact that it's a peaceful thing, and so I was curious about that.
Right. Well, by saying that, you sort of gave away that you hadn't read very far into the book.
Okay.
Because yeah, as the action progresses, and you can tell as we start to explore the motivations of the rank and file members of this group, you find out why they're so damaged and what they've suffered at the hands of the religious traditions that they grew up in. Of course,
Okay.
Robin Fox is a professor of religion and peace. And like me, he is interested in exploring world religions and especially in finding out what they have to contribute to the cause of world peace. So he, like me, is a bit of an idealist that way. But of course, eventually he is going to run up on the rocks of harsh reality and see the other side as it affects these characters that he's interrogating.
Was he religious at one time? Was Robert Fox, Robin Fox, was he a religious person? And if so, could you tell us what denomination he kind of went to and fell away from, or? Was he
Well, he's a
atheist from his
seeker.
whole life?
He grew up in the Catholic Church, but he is also, he doesn't feel that that's the only way. He has spent his life exploring the different faith traditions. One of the touchstone moments came from him when he was serving as a military interrogator in Iraq, and he met an imam whom he greatly admired. And after he left the service with a case of PTSD, he spent some time traveling the world and immersing himself in um, different faith traditions. Like, he's patterned off of some professors of comparative religions that I've heard of. So he's very ecumenical. He does have the tradition that he's grown up in, but that doesn't really define him. And you could maybe say that the core of his being is a question mark. So what is the reality? What is the true nature of the divine?
And I have two questions actually.
Mhm.
Is this going to be a movie? And if so, I know somebody that would make a fantastic Robin Fox.
Well, you'll
is
need
this
to talk to
Kyle.
you'll need to talk to my editor about that. And
He's got that
so,
look. He does. Look at him. Come on, he's so photogenic. Did you not see him starring in it? He looks like a professor with glasses, does he not?
He looks great. Kyle always looks great. But like while I do think it's an interesting plot and something to think about, do you think that it could that your book could possibly, or a potential movie could possibly do damage to the non-religious community in demonizing them to religious people and making them more wary of atheist people?
I don't feel that. I very much doubt that anyone is going to finish my book and put it down and say, "Oh my God, all atheists want to blow up the world." For a number of reasons.
That's a good thing.
One being that I think I've made it very clear that this group is a splinter group, and of course, the mainstream atheist community vehemently and vociferously condemns it, the same way the mainstream Muslim community would if there's an incident that involves Muslims. Like I say, mainstream, of course, there are the violent factions that like to claim credit. But no, I don't feel that. Well, again, if they do, if anybody comes away from my book with that impression, I apologize. But I feel that I was on safer ground taking this theme than I would have been if I had just jumped on the bandwagon and written yet another thriller in which the villains were Muslim terrorists. Because
Right.
in that case, I feel like I would have been punching down. Like in this case, as you say, this scenario is so implausible on the face of it that I think anyone who picks this up would say, "Oh yes, this is just a complete work of fiction. It couldn't really happen."
It would be a hell of an episode of 24, though, or a season of 24. If you could get Kiefer Sutherland to play Robin.
The 11th or 12th season, it could have been. That should have been. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I'm actually really looking forward to reading the rest of it.
What's coming up next?
Interviews with me.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
I feel that Robin Fox has future adventures in store because he could go anywhere in the world where there's a conflict with any kind of a religious nature. So yes, I do have some further adventures for him in mind. So watch the space.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. The rest of this one, and then whatever else you've got.
Thank you.
Steve, are there any questions from the live chat?
No, not yet. But I mean, I might have one or two. Just I think it's a very plausible scenario. I don't think there's any really, from what I've heard so far, because I have not read the book, but I would like to. I don't heard anything that I think that's going to put anybody over the edge as far as saying, "Oh, look at all these evil atheists. Look what they're planning to do." I think that would be an extreme. I mean, the people that are against certain atheists already tend to be more the zealot type, and I don't think this is going to affect any other person. to that regard. And I think that you're right. I think that if you would have taken it and done some religious group or something like that, that would be a punching down. That would have been not a novel thing. I think that this is novel. I think it's interesting. I think the approach is sound, even though there's only a small chance it could actually happen in reality. I think that's what makes good fiction, something that seems plausible, whether it's going to happen or not, but it has that what if factor. That's what I get out of it. So we'll take some questions from the audience if they have. Put it through on the live chat or through the Twitter.
It's the moving pieces, though, to me that really kind of fascinate me with this whole thing. It is, okay, you can get in the mindset of somebody thinking that it may be worth doing something that drastic in order to propel society forward, even though it wouldn't be, in my personal opinion. It's not very far-fetched to see people that could bring themselves to that conclusion, I don't think. Especially nowadays. I mean, people are looking for a cause nowadays. I mean, it's almost frightening how
it is true.
I agree. I think my skepticism kind of peaks when it comes to organizing those people and actually getting a kind of following. Like that's where my skepticism comes in. Like on a mass scale. I don't mean like,
but they already have,
I think
a
small splinter group. Sorry,
sure.
lag.
But how many do you need though? I mean, we are already atheist organizations that promote just more than, hey, don't believe in God. I mean, let's just put it out there. Most atheist organizations have other agendas on their mind. That's fine.
No, I totally agree.
They don't say, hey, they don't say this is atheism, therefore you must be this, and this. They're like, hey, we happen to be atheists. We happen to additionally have this in common, and we're going to promote that. Perfectly fine with that. But different agenda, Kyle. But I think that there might be a small group of those disenfranchised ex-religious people that are still angry that might take a more militaristic, and violent approach. It's completely plausible to me.
Well, a small group, yeah, I agree with you. A small group, but like to be able to eradicate religious people all over the world, like I think that would
atheism plus.
That would need this right here.
The new atheist. So somebody wants to know why you didn't make
the whole idea of.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. The whole
idea.
No,
go ahead. We have way lag because of Japan. Go ahead.
Of a terrorist group is like not necessarily to eradicate, but just to spread terror. Like the core message, I think, of any terrorist group is until we get our way, none of you are safe. So
that's Casey's
way. So here's my follow-on question. Here's my follow-on question. What good would that do? Like for their mission, if their goal is to create terror and make religious people like scared or whatever, what good would causing terror do? How would that further their goal?
Well, that's a question that you would have to ask any terrorist, because rationally it doesn't. Like you look at things, you look at terror attacks in the past, basically they've had the opposite effect. It just entrenches the opposition further. It just makes them pay closer attention to security. But that doesn't stop people from joining terror groups and committing terror acts on a regular basis. And I think the reason why most people do that in the real world is because they feel they have no other option, that their only power lies in striking at what they see as an oppressive agent in any way they can. So, and that was what, in some degree, motivated my villains. And my feeling about, writing antagonists is that the best antagonist is the kind of person who will make you say, now, if the same thing had happened to me, if I were in the same situation, can I be absolutely sure that I would not have done the same thing? So I think when we see the rank and file members of this group and we hear their stories, if we say, if that had been me would I or would I not have done the same thing? Like, of course, in your case, the answer is probably no, because you're rational. But
well,
if
thank you.
somebody
I've
were
been told otherwise.
that close to the edge
Oh,
and
you're doing so
somebody
well.
gave them that necessary push, then you could see how they could easily fall over into the world of violence and terror.
There's a good thing here, though. There's a good side to the story, because we on the atheist side will never have to worry about going to such great lengths in terms of terror, as long as we have people like Kent Hovind and Ray Comfort on the other team. They are the best
Yeah, true.
form of. So yeah, that's they're doing the job for us. So rah team. Were there any questions?
Yeah, that's a good
Steve?
point, actually. You know what? That's a good point, by the way. Very good point. Well, somebody wants to know, and I forgot who it was, please forgive me, but they want to know if you did a sequel or something, or why didn't you make it like angry flat earthers trying to dominate the entire world and turn it to like one big flat earth conspiracy? I think it's a good
will
question,
make tons
actually.
of money. Flat earthers
You
everywhere will buy it.
freaking rich. Exactly.
I was getting ready to say, if you want a
Gold!
lucrative, if you want a lucrative idea, that's the one.
There you
because
go.
That will sell in droves.
I'm telling you, yeah, that's a good idea, actually, man. Because you know,
man.
I can see that with I can see that with the flat earthers. They
This
are
time,
freaking-
Robert's flat out of options. Robert's flat out of options.
Exactly.
Will he go over the edge or get stuck in the
You
firmament?
guys are a mess.
No
Well,
dome can contain Robin Fox.
I want to thank you. Oh, hey! Oh, wow! That's impressive. That's when you know you're doing right. When
I should be taking notes.
Exactly, man.
You really
Give us the cut of the profits.
you really should. We'll only bring you down.
These are free ideas.
The
Don't
only-
worry
the
about
only-
free ideas.
The only compensation we require is a signed copy of the book.
Yeah.
That sounds fair.
I would take that too.
And me as Robin. Me as Robin. We all agree to that, right?
Yes, I agree to
here's a
that.
better
I
idea.
think Kyle would
We got a
agree.
better idea. He would be a good one. We got a better one. Iron Charioteer.
The
like-
author is
like
never
noticed him.
involved in casting decisions. I have to leave that up to the producer.
Oh yeah,
And
well,
Steve
we're
should
gonna
be
do
the
this.
villain.
Just follow our lead. Trust us. We'll give you the good ideas. Flat Earther zombie apocalypse. Even better.
Oh, no.
Just when
I
you
think
thought
Steve
flat
should be
Earth
the
could
villain.
get juicier enough.
I have great machinations.
I could be the
I
villain.
like the way Charles
right?
said. You could be. Oh, you could be. You got some dark eyeliner. Hell
Okay,
yeah.
we're gonna
Yeah.
before we get too crazy, we're gonna give we're gonna give Charles the opportunity to tell everybody by it. The only thing with flat earthers becoming zombies is that they would be too stupid to know to go for the brains. You would have them like gnawing at your ankles and shit like that.
I
So,
think it'd actually be I think it'd be an increase in their intelligence by being a zombie, but that's just me.
Maybe that's. Hey, we should debate that next Sunday, Steve.
That's a step
that'd
up.
be good.
Here we go. Zombie flat earthers against living flat earthers. Which ones are dumber?
Ankle biters. Well, Charles, thank you for coming and embracing the crazy that is NonSequitur. I enjoyed it. I came out with a different kind of decision in my head than I came in. I came in thinking that even with the premise of the book and how the story plays out, that it was just too far-fetched. But once we peel back those layers and you really kind of get down to it, it's crazy, but people can, I think, make an argument. So I think you found something really, really good here, and I'm glad that you shared it with us 100%. So I'm going to let you tell everybody about your channel, not your channel, sorry, where to get your book, and what you have coming up, if you plug anything else like that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to share this, and thank you to Kyle and Casey and Steve for this wonderful discussion. So I'm really glad that I had this opportunity, and I hope that you like the book. If you would like to see the further adventures of Robin Fox, just follow me on Facebook or Twitter, and of course, new titles will always be available on Amazon as they come out, so watch this space. And
Excellent.
if you like
And
the
we've
book,
got-
then please help it to go viral.
Thank you. Ooh, I got that viral mind virus there.
Link is
Kyle,
in the
are you going to put
description,
the Twitter and stuff in the description?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
see what he did there? You see what he did there? That was clever. That was clever.
Yeah, I did. I saw it. That was great.
And now we go to the last but not least, our truth hammer, Casey.
What am I supposed to say now?
Yeah, she got a good sign off. Oh, before we do sign off, one last thing.
You make content and stuff like that. Don't you want to plug it? Come on, girl.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do make content. I have a YouTube channel, but most of my content, well, all of my content resides on the Godless Engineer channel. So you can find me there, YouTube/Godless Engineer. And I'm on Twitter, GE_Caitlin. And I, interact on Twitter regularly. Sometimes I'm nicer. Sometimes I'm not.
Sometimes.
Message me and I'll let you know which day it is.
Yeah, I talk to Kyle almost every day.
Yeah, we'll get you guys notice ahead of time what mood she's in, right? But tonight, if anybody's interested, on my channel, I have Mr. Atheist and Eric Murphy from Talk Heathens, and if Casey and Kyle want to come on by as well, we're gonna have a rum and coke night tonight, which means, well, it just means we just get drunk and talk shit. So that's it,
Yes.
Fun for the entire
And
family. Bring the kids, family, wife.
Yeah, and Mr. Atheist Jimmy, he's great. If you don't follow him, you should go do that.
Yeah,
he's super entertaining. I really
awesome.
enjoy his conversations. Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, that will do it for us tonight. We will be back here tomorrow at 8 for Rick Yefrak. I'm so proud that I'm able to pronounce that now. You should, guys, if you haven't seen the first video with me trying to do that name, it's worth a view. Drink a shot every time I try to pronounce his name, and you will be drunk by the half of the show. We will see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock for the Trader's Coin. Thank you once again to KC and Charles for joining us. Fantastic discussion, and we look forward to seeing more of you in the. Go buy the book. It's down below, and we'll see you tomorrow.